How are you today? My name is Mark Schweenard. I'm the pen maker for JJ Artwood, and this is my shop. I make pens, kaleidoscopes, and other collectibles. And I'm glad you stopped in today. I'd like to show you what I do, and I thought today we'd make a pen and see how you like it. You're going to start with a pen kit. You choose a design of pen that you like and what you're looking at. Today we're going to use this particular one-tube design just for simplicity of explanation. You get the hardware with the pen. You have your refill. Normally we upgrade the refill because they put in the bare minimum, and you like to have a nice flow. There's an end cap which will dress the end of the pen, which gives it a nice finished look. The nib, which the part you hold, it comes out of there, so it adds a very nice clean touch. And the rest of them are just pretty much brass fittings that'll hold it all together. There's a transmission. As you twist it, it advances and retracts the refill, and of course the pocket clip. So what we're doing today is going to be a single tube pen. It's not a really big pen. It's not an overpowering type pen, but it is very handy, and it does feel well in your hand, and it writes well. The brass tube, we're going to use an acrylic today. It's very durable. And being this type of pen is normally not in an office environment, it's a shirt pocket work pen, it's going to encounter all kinds of environment. Water, oil, dirt, and the acrylics offer an excellent protection to the tube and the inner workings of the pen. And they're very pleasing to look at. They're going to use this blank on it, and against the chrome it'll look nice, and it'll just make a good sturdy pen. The big thing with a pen is you want it to feel good in your hand, and you want it to flow well, so you don't have to worry about whether it's writing or not. You just want it to feel good and work. Everything after that is a frill. First step we're going to do in building a pen is we have to make the tube and the jacketing material the same length, so everything will fit together in a nice tight configuration. Normally I have a precision caliper. I'll take the measurement on a tube and then transfer the measurement from the tube to the jacketing material, and then cut the jacketing material down the size so it fits the tube. So it's pretty critical that this be right on the money, because if it's not cut right, nothing else will square up. And the most important thing in a pen is the first step. Everything has to be square. That's the secret to a good pen. Okay, so here's our tube. This is going to be the main body of the pen. Here's our jacketing material. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take out the measurement on a tube. It might be off a little bit, so you want to make sure that you have this figure right on the money. So we're going to check that in both inches and millimeters, and it looks good. Okay, so we know our tube is the right length because we've checked it with this. So now, when we're going to take our measurement, we're going to look for the better side of the jacketing material, or the blank. This seems to be a better square side. So we're going to apply a little bit of science to it and get a nice clean measurement on it. And that's it. Now we're going to go cut it. The first step after your precision measuring, the first step is to cut the blank down the size. It's very important that it is squared up. I have this saw that I set up specifically for pen making. That's all I make on this. I don't cut any other wood. I don't do anything else with it. It is a laser sighting saw. So everything is right on the money. So it makes cutting the blank a lot easier in the beginning, and through the whole process of assembling the pen, I know that it's square and it's going to go together the way it's supposed to go together. And that's one little thing I don't have to worry about. And it just makes the whole process easier. Where we're at right now is we're bringing the laser in online with the mark we put on a tube. And as I said earlier, I know the saw is plumb. The saw is all squared up, the gate's squared up. So as long as I'm on that line with the laser, I can just drop on it and it'll give me a clean cut. Here we go. we've cut the blank down to size, we want to come back and we want to double check it with the tube. And there we go. We have just enough on either side that when we trim it back with a squaring, we're going to just have enough material on each end to square it up, get it nice and square, get it right down the size, and it's perfect. So this is probably as good as it's going to get with an acrylic blank. Normally if I do a wood blank, I'll leave a little more material. It gives me a chance to work it a little bit more. Wood blanks tend to be less dependable. You never know what you're going to run into with them, but with an acrylic blank, it's like money in a bank. It just does what you want it to do. They're very durable, they're easy to work, and they make an attractive pen. So the next step is going to be to polish the tube. So what we'll do is polish the tube. It's simply a process, taking a piece of paper, sandpaper, just give it a quick spin. You can see where it's shining. It's starting to shine now. And what we're doing with this is we're taking all the oils and contaminants off of the brass that was accumulating during production. And now I got a good clean piece of brass. And next we will drill the blank in preparation for putting the brass in it. We're going to take our blank, we're going to bring it over to the drill press. The vise that I have here is the self-centering vise. And what it will do is, as soon as I close the clamp on it, it automatically centers it to the drill bit. Once it's centered like that, it's pretty much a straightforward process of just driving it home. But once you start drilling, you drill in a little ways, and then you kind of visually check it to make sure you're centered on the blank, and then you start going in farther. You're constantly going to be watching for smoke, because if you heat the blank up, because it's acrylic, it'll have a tendency to warp on you. And that's it. So we'll remove it from the centering vise, and we'll give it a couple of minutes to cool down. You can see we have a nice, straight, clean hole through it. Okay, now with pen making, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that when you start with a blank, you've probably got 3/8 of an inch of material here. And with that material, it's quite opaque. Once the material is turned on the pen, to give you an idea, that's how much of the material you take off. So the material gets quite thin, and it tends to want to bleed the colors through that are underneath it. So what you would look at is, when you put the tube in, there's a very good chance that when you turn it down to size, you'll actually start seeing some of the brass color coming through the tube. So in order to prevent this, what we'll do, and we do on all of our pens, is I take a pearlized paint, which is not, it's still somewhat transparent. It's not quite opaque, but it's not so in your face that you'll see it under the pen blank. It's just enough. It's just enough to take away the brass color. And we'll coat the blank with that, make sure we get plenty of it in there. And once we glue the tube inside now, if there is any thin spots or any very light pigmented spots in the blank, or this will keep the brass color from coming through and showing up on the outside and ruining the appearance of your pen. And it's just one of those things that no matter how many times I do it, I can't get it done without getting paint on myself. My wife thinks I should use crayons. And that's it. Now we wait for it to dry. Okay, now that all the paint's dried and the glue's dried on the tube, we've inserted it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to clean up the end of the whole blank now, and we're going to get it ready to turn on the lathe. So what we're going to do is we have these inserts, and we're just going to try them. We're going to get the tightest fit because we want to get a nice clean edge. And once we have that edge straightened out, we're going to be ready to turn it on the lathe, and you'll really see something nice coming out. Okay, so we're going to use this insert. So we insert it down into the tube, and it acts as a guide. And we have a little mill end on our drill, And what this does, it just cleans up the end of the tube. It takes all the little burrs off the brass, it takes all the little parts that got missed, and it squares the tube up. And that end's ready to go. You can see a nice clean color and a nice moon all the way around it. And then we'll flip over to the other side and we'll do the same thing. Now we've got a nice clean color. We'll go a little farther so we get it right down to the brass. It has to be exact, right on the brass. And there we have it. Now we have our blank for our pen. And a good way to double check that, just before you get onto the lathe, because once you start turning, it's too late. Once you start cutting, you can't put it back. So we'll take a set of bushings that were designed for this particular pen. We're going to insert them. And once they insert, what we're going to check is around the edge. And if it's flush all the way around the edge, then that means the blank is square. And we'll check this side. Nice tight fit. Nice and flush all the way around the end. No gaps, no low spots. This blank is ready to turn now at this point. This is where the rubber meets the road. Everything we've done to this point is all in preparation of turning the pen. The more careful you are in preparing it, the easier this process is going to be. If the blank is ill prepared, there's always a possibility that you're going to spin the tube inside the blank. Once that happens, it's junk. There's nothing you can do with it. There's always the possibility that if it didn't glue in properly and you don't have a good seal, it may actually allow parts of the plastic from the acrylic blank to blow up and fly off the pen while you're turning it. It's not going to kill you, but it'll sure ruin your day. There's a lot of work involved to this point, and this is where you find out if you did it right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to load the lathe and start turning. Okay, so what we've got now is we're using a mandrel system. There's two systems of turning, on center and a mandrel. The centers are basically two of these, and they hang in the middle. The piece hangs in the middle and there's no rod penetrating. With the one tube, the mandrel isn't okay because you don't get a wobble. You're still going to get a nice clean cut. So we're going to set the tube on, and we have a threaded rod here, and this is going to tighten it all down, but I don't like to use more than I have to. So what I'll do is I'll set the nut on the end of it, and we're just going to let a few of the threads show through, and we're going to loosen up the mandrel part, and we're actually going to back it in there a little bit. As you can see, it's adjustable depending on the size of the blank that you put on it. And we're going to tighten it down. Now you're not building a bridge, so you don't have to over tighten it. All you got to do is just kind of tighten it down so it's not going to move. We're going to snug that up and we're going to give it a turn. Now that's a nice tight turn. Now the reason when we squared everything up with the end mill is once you start tightening it down, it creates the pressure on the two bushings. And if there's any plastic that's sticking above the brass tube, it's going to crush under the pressure. So the brass tube and the plastic together are plenty to hold, but one or the other will crush without the other. So it's very important that that blank is squared up. And I can't stress preparation enough. Everything is preparation. So what we have now is we're getting ready to turn it. We'll set our little guide here. We'll check our speed. We're on the right speed. And that's what it looks like. And what we're going to do now is just make a little tube out of a big tube. There's an assortment of tools that you can use. Your tools have to be sharp. When I make my pens, I find that if I allow my tools to get a little bit dull, the finish on a pen is very wavy. It's not crisp. And if you're going to spend the time to put all of this work into a pen, it's got to be crisp. It's got to look good. So it's important that the tools be sharp. So let's get going and let's see if I got this beauty sharp enough. So we're going to make a first pass. I call it a feel pass. And what it'll do is it'll allow me to feel the high spots on the blank. You hear that? That's where you're going to get the high spots. Now you can already see where the color is starting to come out. How flat it was before and how the color is coming up now. It's starting to get a little bit of a gloss look to it. So we've almost got it cleaned up. There's still a couple more dull spots. So we're going to use the skew one more time on it. That's about as far as I need to go with this. Because it's an acrylic blank, we have tools that are pretty much designed for acrylics. This is a wood tool, and it does a tremendous job on wood. But for ease, I'll use a rounder pre-sharpened edge, and it'll bring it down a lot quicker and a lot smoother, and it won't generate the heat that the sharpened skew will generate. That's what you end up with. So we're going to turn this blank into a pile of this. Try and keep the hairs out of there, because what will happen is they'll get caught on the edge of the tool, and as they spin by the blank they'll heat up and it'll dull the blank, and it'll actually leave a groove in the blank. Now the thing with the blank is to take it down slow so you have a control of the shape. Patience here is a must, because if you lose patience, there's no putting it back. Once it's gone, it's gone. So you have to be patient. You know, everyone thinks, well, I'll get a bigger tool and take a bigger cut. But like anything else, sometimes it's just a matter of patience. And my glasses are safety glass, so I would recommend that if any of you want to try this, and it's getting to be a very big hobby at this point. There are a lot of people getting into pen making because it's one of those things that it's quite relaxing, and it's one of those art forms that you have immediate gratification when you're done. So after we turn this down, we're done with it. It's done. We get to look at what we did, we get to appraise it, and then we get to give it away. Start over again tomorrow. After you've been doing this for a while, all your friends and family will stop answering the phone because they're concerned you're bringing more junk over the house that you made. So that's why I started doing JJ Artwood, was pretty much to make the hobby self-supporting, because the more elaborate you get, the more money it costs, just simply for the pen kits. I mean, you know, 24 karat gold plating is, they've got that down to a science to where it's really just enough gold that it'll add color. So for any real gold, you need to go with a 22 or an 18 karat, which is harder than the 24, but it's also more expensive because there's usually more of it on the kit. It's kind of like, here's a good example of how it gets hot and it just seizes. It's almost like a solid piece of plastic. So you kind of have to, you know, watch for those things. And then, of course, after you make a few of them, you got to go to the craft shows. And well, what's a craft show without a bunch of tables you only use when you go to the craft shows? And you know, then you need tablecloths, and then you need, of course, the obligatory trailer to haul it around in, so you look like you're a craft show veteran. And next thing you know, you'd have been better off having another kid that you could put through college than spending all the money on this type of thing. This is very addictive, it's very relaxing, and quite frankly, as aggravating as it gets. So what we got now is, see how it heats up and it gets brittle. Well, you want to get that out of there, because what will happen is at some point it'll get picked up by the tool. And if it gets picked up by the tool and it gets back onto the blank, it'll actually melt itself into the blank, which really, the first time it happens to you, it kind of freaks you out because you can't figure out what happened to the blank. But, you know, it's just every now and then you have to stop, and not only to clean this off, but more or less to just kind of look at the blank and see where you're going with it. So we're getting a nice smooth finish, and it's kind of giving you a feel of how the blank looks. You know, the blacks are getting darker, the maroon is getting deeper, and it's just getting a richer look to it. And that's what we want to do. So we'll go down a little farther, and then we're going to start shaping. But right now, all we're doing is we're bringing it down to a workable diameter to where, you know, we can kind of get a feel for the look we want. There are several different cuts you can put on any pen, and it changes the entire personality of the pen. So you have to kind of make a variety of things. So let's see where we go from here. And you can see this pink stripe. This is where actually the plastic is starting to bind itself. You can see a little ring where it was. So that's what you have to watch for. I mean, it's not earth-shattering at this point because we're not anywhere near a finished pass, but when you start to get to the point where you're going to finish it, you have to make sure that you head this stuff off. So then we'll clean it up with a skew and we'll start bringing it down. Didn't think I had one of these, did you? Bet your ass I do. Okay, so the skew is dulled out a little bit. So what we're going to do with it is we're going to just run it over this file. You know, it's just a diamond stone. And all it's going to do is just bring the edge back on the cutting tool. You know, sometimes it wears quick. You know, the last pen I cut with it may have been a harder material and wore it down. So we just have to make sure that we don't burn the plastic off. We want it to cut the plastic. So, yeah, it's still burning. It just, when all else fails, turn the edge. So by turning the edge on this tool, what we're doing is we're revealing a fresh cutting surface. So we'll finish out with that. The problem is, because of the way this blank is cast, I really don't want to take the chance on catching some of the casting material that it's inside. It's actually cast with a flake material and then filled with a resin. So there are individual pieces in there. And if you catch one, it'll rip it right out. So you just have to be patient with it and go from there. You can get a nice thin cut. And that's going to pull it down for us. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to try and level everything. Try to make a nice shape, get a nice good level cut. Okay, there's our general pen shape. You can cut it thinner, heavier. Like I said, it depends on what you like. I mean, if you make them all the same size, then, you know, it's basically, you got to be able to move them off. And the craft fairs, I'm not really a pen producer. Not a lot of my pens are the same. Most of them are one of a kind. So I don't make a pen that I like the way it looks and say, oh boy, I got to make a couple more of them like that. Because then you're getting into a production thing. That's really not what I'm all about. I'm all about making a pen, and like I said, making using art, I think, is unfair, because it's not really art, it's more craft. I think when you decide on the kit and you match the blank and you have a vision for what it's going to look like, as soon as you start cutting and drilling, the art part is over, and then it becomes craft. It's kind of, you know, it's kind of like the guy that writes the Moonlight Sonata. He's an artist. The guy that plays it flawlessly is a craftsman. So, you know, where's that fine line? So I don't really consider myself an artist or my pen's an art, but I do consider them, you know, somewhat a work of imagination. Call it industrial art, just to you know, put a title to it. But you know, I have seen pens that are art, and you know, certainly you're not gonna go to you know, Toys R Us and sign a charge card bill with them. On a flip side of it, you know, where my pens are, I consider them to be a lot of accessory. You know, you wouldn't wear a, you know, a very expensive suit with a $2 tie. Well, the same thing goes if you're going to sign a very high-end contract. You don't want to pull out a plastic pen with the end of it chewed up. So it's kind of a fine line, and it's just a passion that I have. As silly as it sounds, it's just something I like to do. You know, some people that work a lathe, and I know other pen makers that, you know, make bowls and everything else. I just like making pens. So here's my pen. So we're going to take it to the next step. Okay, so now we've cut the blank down and we have our basic shape of the pen. I left it kind of a little bit beefy because, you know, like I said, you don't want to cut them all small. Some people have bigger hands, some people like something to hang on to. So given this profile, we'll just kind of take a look and see what we ended up with. At this point, I'm going to use a block sander. We'll pull the guide out of the way, and I'm just going to use a block sander on it with some 400 wet or dry. And what that'll do is it'll just kind of mellow the surface out a little bit. You know, there's slight imperfections, but if you go after it with a tool, you may create an entire layer that has to come off. So I found this to be probably the easiest and one of the quickest ways to get it done. And aside from that, it gives you an idea where your low spots are, because the paper will automatically pick them up. So the trick with this is just a little bit of patience. This is just a cleanup pass. I mean, you count more on feel than you do on vision, because as everybody knows, a straight line isn't perfectly straight. So if it feels good, then that's the biggest thing. Like I said, a pen has to feel good and it has to work. So in the 1800s, they went to ballpoint. Prior to that, actual writing pens were developed for the pleasures of royalty. You know, because they didn't want to have to deal with the leads, but you know, they've come a long way to now where they're you know, actually, I hate to say it, but they're pretty much pure decadence. A real nice pen. I mean, you have you know, different manufacturers that have quite a reputation, and the nice thing about doing a one-off pen like this is the pen is a solid piece when you start with it, where a lot of the manufacturers now, some of the well-known manufacturers actually, they'll use a brass tube, and then what they'll do with it is they'll use a veneer. They'll glue it right to the tube. So I've had several of my customers bring me these to repair the veneer lift. Just started lifting off the brass tube. So I like using a solid blank to to turn because it's not going to lift off the tube. Okay, so what I have now, what you're looking at here is my first phase of rub down and inspection. So we're starting to get an idea what the pen's going to look like. It has a very nice nice reflective quality to it. And with the painted tube on the back side, any of the blacks where the flake is thinned out, that potentially could be a spot where you would see some brass coming through. But because we take the time to back paint the tubes, that's not an issue. And that's usually a sign of a pretty good pen, is when you have a uniform appearance on it. We've got a few scratches. We're just going to take care of those scratches, and then we'll go for polishing. When you polish a pen, if there's a scratch, it'll stay in the pen. Polishing is just shining it up. It's not surface preparation. So it's very important that you check it for the scratches and that you work around them. If there's a scratch in there, you work it out, and then when you go to the polishing steps, which start at about 600 and go up to 12,000, there's 9 different polishing pads in the series. So we're going to start with the first pad, which is a #1 pad, and we're going to just let it work. And what we're doing now is we're creating angel hair scratches in the finish, and we want to make those scratches uniform. And then when we go to the next pad, the scratches will decrease, and so on up until the 12,000 pad, where there's still scratches in the surface, but they're so fine that you won't pick them up with the naked eye. And that's pretty much what you want. It gives a nice clean appearance. It's smooth. It's basically bulletproof. You know, oil won't bother it, water won't bother it. If you drop it, it won't bother it. These acrylics are pretty durable. They've come quite a long ways in the last few years. And they make a nice little pen. This is one of those steps that you just kind of, not a lot you can do. You just stand there and keep watching and see what happens. But as it's spinning, you're seeing a very, very nice burgundy color coming out of it. And you know, if you put them together on a still, you probably wouldn't believe that one made the other. And like my grandfather used to say, you throw them there side by each, they don't look the same no more. And actually, this is, I'm like 3rd generation at this. My grandfather came from Canada, and he arrived in this country. All he had was a copy of The Perils of Pauline. I'll never forget that. And he used to carry luggage down at the Rivoli Theater in Chicopee from the train station that was down at the end of Front Street. And he used to make the croquet mallets for the croquet club, which was on Front Street, which is now the Portuguese club. It used to be a croquet club there years ago. And that's what he used to do. I used to watch him turn them. Not for long. I mean, it was pretty much at the end of his turning career when I was a little boy. But you know, it's a funny thing. Back then, they'd give you a saw to play with. Hey, you know, take this piece of wood, go over there, cut it, and then come back and steam it. You know, and I think that's what we miss in today's society. You know, it's there aren't enough people playing with saws. I swear to God. And you know, that's how we learned how to do it. So it's kind of, a lot of these things are becoming lost art, and a lot of them are becoming refound. Pen turning is getting to be quite a pastime now. It's getting quite popular. There are several pen turning websites, club websites, and people are getting into it more and more every day. And it's peaceful. All kidding aside, it's very peaceful. It allows you to think. It's great for hand-eye coordination. I'm contented with what I do. I make my pens, and every now and then somebody buys them, which is the greatest compliment to me, because that means somebody else likes my work besides me and my wife. So now we have it. We have a finished blank, and this is what our pen's going to look like. Okay, now that we've turned and we've polished, we're essentially at the point where we're done with this particular step. So we're going to unchuck it and see what we ended up with. Now, as a further step that I like to use that a lot of people won't use, I tend to use them on my pens because it just kind of assures me that there's a certain quality fit to it, is that I'll take a little handle that I made and I mounted it on a washer, so I know that washer is flat. And again, I'll just drop one of the tubes on it, and then I'll slip the tube over. And what that'll do is any little spots that may have occurred through the turning, the heat generation, you know, a piece of plastic may have worked its way in between the blank and the bushing. And if it got hot enough, it'd actually melt itself right to the lip that we mount at. And that's all it takes. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you a comparison of some of the things that you can do with a lathe. So what we have now is we have the finished blank. And to give you a comparison of the difference that comes out and how you have to have a certain thought process that you go through to imagine it. If you look at the two blanks here side by side, they look quite different at this point. Okay, so now that we've turned the blank, we kind of got everything ready to go. You can see it's a pretty blank. Gonna make a nice pen. We're going to take our hardware and we're going to put it out here and kind of sort through it and make sure we have everything. Yep, got one of those. We need one of these, 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 and one of these. First piece we're going to put in here, and all this is just a little bit of a extender for the nib. So we're going to bring that in and we're going to press it down nice and gently, and just keep checking it to make sure that it's going in really square. The big problem with a lot of these pens is that if you put them in crooked, there's no going back. At this point, everything is dependent on just a little bit of patience and a little bit of luck. This is going to slip into here now. Okay, so we've got that slipped in. At this point, we can pretty much assemble the bottom end of the pen. A refill, transmission, to allow it to advance and withdraw the refill. Put it in there, and here's the workings of your pen. So at this point, we haven't messed it up too badly. What I'm going to try and do, though, is I'm going to try and bring it down just a little bit further, because I think that maybe the end of the pen should come out just a tad more. And this is one of those things that if you get overzealous with it, you'll crush it and you have junk. That's a nice adjustment. When you put a pen together, what you're looking for is an even flow on the line. If it's back too far, it doesn't look right, and it doesn't flow right when you're writing. If it's out too far, the same thing happens. It looks like a mistake, but it just doesn't flow when you're writing. So you have to adjust this, and the travel adjustment on this is done with the arbor press and the pieces. Normally they're pretty close to right on the money, but you just want to make sure. It's one of those things that, you know, if you get it right, it's right. If you get it wrong, it's not right, and it never will be. So at that point, we're ready to go. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, if you look at the tube, it has a certain slope to it. I always like to keep the possum belly a little bit higher. We call it a possum belly because if it's down, it's where it hangs. So I like to keep the possum belly a little bit high and then slip the tube on just to see how the fit is. When you run your finger over it, you shouldn't feel any hang-ups. It should just be a nice smooth transition, and that is. So what we'll do is we'll take and we'll assemble the back side of the pen to end it. It's put that there. This will go here, and it's just a press fit, nice and easy, just that easy, nice and gently. You're going to pull down the pocket clip, and what I usually like to do is just stop a little bit shy and make sure I have a good alignment on the pocket clip. It's cut pretty close, but you know what? Pretty close don't get it done, because if you have a hang up on it, the pen seems like it's misassembled, and that's what we don't want. So at this point, that looks like a pretty good fit. Feels good. Let's let her roll. So we'll pop this in here. Now, you always want to keep the finished pieces on the wood so you don't scratch them with the arbor. I use tape over the front of the arbor, but Murphy's Law always working. You want to keep it where it's not going to damage it. And we'll just bring that in. Nice tight fit. And there's our pen. It's a decent sized pen without being too big. At this point we have a finished pen. You've seen pretty much the steps. It is a labor of patience. It's a labor of practice. You start out normally, if somebody's making pens, they want to make pens. You normally start out turning wood dowels and everything else before you start with a pen, because the pen, like I said, once you start cutting, you can't put it back. It's a very attractive pen. Is it going to change someone's life? I doubt it. Is it art? I doubt that too. You know, most artists are pretty strange guys, and I like to think myself normal, as most strange guys do. And quite frankly, if I were a real artist, I'd probably cut an ear off, but given the size of my head, it'd look like a coffee mug. Where I go from here normally is I'll bring the pen inside the house. I'll use a wax on it and clean it up, clean the fingerprints off of it, and just make sure it works well. I'll write a few lines with it, just try it out. Make sure that when my customer gets this pen, he's got something that had my complete attention, that the customer has something that they're not going to say, I'm sorry I purchased this. And that's the constant fear that I have. You can turn them well, you can polish them, you can do whatever you want with them, but if they don't work well and they don't feel well, then it'll end up in the drawer with that 19-cent plastic pen you stole from Quickie Mart. So that's my biggest fear. And in order to get that fear over with, I'm going to take this in the house now, I'm going to clean it up a little bit, and I'm going to write something with it. And while we're there, I'll show you some of the other things I've done. Okay, so now that we've gotten the pen finished, we got it off the lathe, we've assembled it, and I just finished cleaning it up and we polished it all out. It's a very nice looking pen. And I tried it out in the kitchen on some paper before I cleaned it, and it writes well. So I guess we did it right this time. It doesn't happen every time. Every now and then you're going to lose a couple of pens. Magic world of film, we went through this rather quickly, but normally on a pen like this you'll normally spend a good 4 hours, 5 hours, and sometimes it goes overnight. When you build some of the higher end pens, it goes overnight. So it's kind of a labor of love for me. But it is a commitment. I mean, you commit garage space, you commit time, energy, effort, not to mention just the monetary involvement with the tools and the different kits. So if you like doing it, all I can say is try it. And it's a disease. Once you have it, if you like it, you'll never go back. And then you too will have all your friends and relatives avoiding you so you don't give them more junk. So now that we've wrapped all of this up, basically I've got another pen for the collection. This is just some of the things that I've kind of drifted off into in my pen making. Like I said, it's just an enjoyable activity, and you know, you're always looking to improve on something. Here, for example, is basically the same pen in a different model with a rose on it. Now, the rose itself is actually an inlay that's 8 pieces of wood. So by using the lathe and using the same techniques that I used on the acrylic pen, we've created this pen, and it's a beautiful, beautiful pen. You know, it's a maple and with the colored inlay. Here's a pen that I made with aluminum. It just is a very nice looking pen. It's very clean looking, It's a fountain pen, but it's aluminum. So it's basically bulletproof. Here's the same pen with a carbon fiber blank. And you can see there's a difference. Just by changing the blank and the cut design, it looks like two different pens. A pen over here that I made with deer antler. And for those of you concerned about the deers, no deer was killed. It's actually pickup. Deer shed their antlers the end of January and in February. So we go out and we collect them, and we'll use them to make a pen. You know, you just cut the antler and drill it and handle it just like you would. The same process as this blank, only a different material. They're actually clay polymers, and it's all handmade. The blank is the actual piece of art on this pen. The pen looks nice on it, but it makes the pen look nice, not vice versa. This is made by Tony Ransfield, and she's a renowned artist in this type of polymer, and she fires it and makes a beautiful pen. Those of you who get tired of burning your money, you can always shred it and make a pen out of it. This particular pen here is made with rhodium, 22 karat gold that's been hand carved and then plated. And the blank itself is actually casein, which is a milk protein product. And if you can see the stripes in it, that's actually a natural occurrence. That's not a man-made occurrence. That's a natural occurrence in the casein. And it makes a very nice, elegant pen. And it's a different material. It's, you know, it does have a certain degree of plastic in it, but for the most part, it's a natural material. The last chestnut tree that George Washington planted succumbed to old age in 2002. And the National Historic Wood Society got the wood. So you would apply for the wood and get a piece of the wood, and they would send you the wood. So this particular pen is 22 karat gold, sterling silver, and it's made with horse chestnut from the last tree that George Washington planted. So it's a very unusual pen. This pen here, I was in the Army, and I wanted something to represent that, so this is an actual 50 caliber round. And I modified it, and the back is a 44 Magnum round, so it's made with two pieces of real live brass, and modified it to take a pen kit, so it's a pen. And despite its look, it's actually kind of comfortable writing with it. But I like it because it's, you know, it reminds me of my Army days. I'm always looking to work with made in USA products, and I found a pen manufacturer who actually makes pens in this country, and it's called Marksman. And this is one of my Marksman pens. It's turned out of polished stainless steel. It's all hand polished, and it's solid stainless steel, and it's made in Dacula, Georgia. 100% American. That in itself is unusual, but I spoke with the young man that owns the company, and he's quite proud of his product, as he should be. This is complete, with the exception of the Bach nib. And the only reason we use a Bach nib is that they're the #1 nib maker in the world. Fortunately, doing all of this, it tends to people wanting different things. My children wanting different things. It's, hey Dad, can you do this? Hey Dad, can you do that? Here's one of my daughters getting married, and she wanted one of these wine bottle suspenders. So I made them, and we're going to use them as centerpieces at her shower. So each table will have a wine bottle suspender and a cork. And it's a, you know, it's a corkscrew and a stopper. And what she's going to do with them is use them for door prizes. So each table will have 2 door prizes, and it'll be one of each. I have the kaleidoscopes that, you know, they're very simple. The medium drops in front of a series of mirrors, and it gives you the kaleidoscope effect. And I make some of these, and these are very nice. They're great conversation starters, and they're great for the end table. You go with a theme thing. I try to stay away from theme things, but, you know, the Thompson submachine gun in a guitar case is kind of like just classic mob. So I had to make one. So I made that. That's kind of like my own little indulgence. I have desk pens that I made where actually they're yo-yos, so when the boss isn't looking, you can play with the yo-yo part of it, And when he comes in, you just put the magnet back on and that's your desk pen. So that works out pretty well. This with my father, actually. We made a knife. We did the handle work. The blade was already finished when we got a hold of it. So that's basically where all of this started, was with my father. When he was sick, I would go down there and help him do his little woodworking projects, and I kind of got the bug. I got hung up on it. It's a Banksia nut from Australia. It's basically their version of our pine cone. It's a seed pod. So in taking it, and I saw it done. I wish I could say I thought of it, but I didn't. I saw it done by another man, and I was pretty impressed with it. So I had to figure out how to do it. So what we'll do is we'll take this, and out of that, we'll quarter it, and we end up with little pieces like this. And it just still doesn't look like much, and it's kind of ugly. It sort of makes you want to wash your hands after you touch it. And then we take those pieces and we enclose them in a mold, and I cast it in resin. So you can see the Banksia here, and it's filled in with resin at this point. Then from this stage, we go into the stage where you saw in the garage, where we actually make pen blanks out of it. And we've drilled it, we've set the tube, and this tube is black because once I turn it, resin will become transparent, and I want to keep that darker color. And after it's turned, this is a finished product pen from the Banksia nut. It has a very, very distinct look, and you can see where it actually changes from one to the other. The farther you go into the center of the Banksia nut, the more different it becomes. When I had started woodworking, it started actually by accident. My father was actually the woodworker. Like I had said, my grandfather was involved in it, my father was involved in it. And my father had gotten cancer, and as his cancer had progressed, it became harder and harder for him to do bigger projects. He was making tables and different things, and when my daughter was going to have my first grandson, my father wanted to make something for his great-grandson. So we decided we were going to make a cradle. And what was nice about making a cradle together with my father was there are a lot of small parts, the dowels, the boards. Put together, it's a good-sized piece, but individually, on an individual basis, it was very handleable. Any individual piece wasn't that heavy. Other than the stand, there were some big pieces, so I pretty much took care of that. But I would work at night, and then I would get out of work, and I would go there during the day, and I would do what little work I had to do to get ahead of him, and I would bring the pieces up to him. And he would just sit in his chair and sand them, and you know, he would polyurethane each one individually and sand it, and he went through the whole process where, you know, it just kept him busy. And the whole thought was that in his mind, I think if he could work on wood, he was okay. So it was important to me that I kept bringing him pieces of wood. We had built these rocking horses. He wanted to have one for each of his grandchildren, so we made it for the grandchildren, and he was quite proud of them. We ended up making about 4 of these. I work with my grandson. He seems very interested in it, so I find little projects that he and I can do around the house or fix things, and they're pretty excited about it. And I have a granddaughter, and she's the same way. They're very hands-on. They're not afraid to grab a hold of something and try to fix it. And I think that's very important for people today, because we're in such a throwaway society, and you know, things are just gonna run out at some point if we can't recycle and we can't reuse. And that's the thing with my pen. A lot of my pens are reused materials. Some of my aluminum pens are old pieces of aluminum that I got out of a scrap pile. People enjoy my products. I have several clients that, you know, they'll call me up, they need a refill, they need this, they need that. Rather than go to Staples, they'll call me up because we talk. I joke with them a lot. And that's the biggest thing to me, is that people enjoy what I do. I love doing the shows. I get to meet other people. I get to get out of the house. It's a bonding for my wife and I. It's a wonderful hobby. It's a wonderful hobby. Here's one other little project that that I came up with. As I was saying earlier, I get a lot of those Dad, can you projects. My daughter that's getting married wanted a keepsake box for her wedding, to use the day of the wedding for her envelopes, and for a keepsake box for photographs afterwards. So what we ended up doing was, she had a specific look in mind. So I brought her to a lumberyard and told her to just pick out a board. Just go find a board that she liked. And about 40 minutes later, she came back with this walnut board. There's a real nice grain in it, a nice wave grain. And it was probably the most expensive piece of wood in the yard, but that's the one she wanted. So we got it. But she wanted a very plain box. So what I ended up doing was taking a box and just cutting it and doweling in maple. So you have a nice blend of maple and walnut. And she just wanted it inside, and she wanted the glass on top so she could put a picture on the top of it. So what I did was I cut 2 pieces of glass. One is cut shorter than the other. And at her wedding, we'll take the top piece out and leave the shorter piece in there, which will leave an opening for the envelopes to be dropped into the box. And once she's done with that, we will put it all back together again, and I'll leave this glass on the back side so she can put pictures. So when she's in her keepsake box, she'll be able to see pictures instead of just having a piece of cardboard there. And what also serves nice is that we'll be able to put a picture of her and her future husband behind the glass that's cut, so they'll see a picture of them, and then they can drop the envelope in. I get my grandchildren those do-it-yourself birdhouses from Home Depot, and I love them. All the holes are drilled, they got a little hammer, they drive the nails in and they paint them, but they're building something. And it gives them a feeling of accomplishment. And that's an important thing today for kids. You know, when you flip the switch, it lets the cord out, they can walk down the hall with the pen, but when you want your pen back, you just flip the switch back, here comes your pen. Person and all, so you'll always know who stole it. I only sold 2, I only made 2. It was actually, as odd as it sounds, I was at a show, and the guy said, geez, I'd love to buy a pen, but I always lose it. And he said, if you can make me a pen I won't lose, I'll buy it. He loved it. And I talked to, actually a couple of weeks after that, I ran into his wife, and he said he plays games with it at the office. The man is rather proud. He had a pretty important position. I did a Christmas show, and this young lady's boss was quite a fisherman, I guess, and she thought he would want it. And I hadn't really intended on selling the second one. I was going to keep it for, just a display to kind of show what else I could do. And she needed it, so I let her buy it. Hey Bob, did you keep the instructions? Anyway, we're going to take this and